StatsSA says crime against women in South Africa remains high. The report has also revealed that females in general feel safer walking alone during the day. This is contrary to the males who don't feel safe during the day. Now, most residents in rural areas feel safer during darkness than those living in urban areas. Joining us is Siphelele Ngobese, a researcher at Inclusive Cities South African Cities Network. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. What should we understand about this dynamic of people not feeling safe in cities?
Well, I think firstly, we must welcome the report as it helps us as city practitioners, particularly at the municipal level, to make better decisions. So it's just one more in a suite of very helpful instruments together with the national crime stats, which are now quarterly. In terms of our own work, which we then take from national crime stats and from the StatsSA issued reports, is that it correlates when you drill down to the city level and you aggregate the same information to the city level. As for, the very, to be expected but still quite concerning statistic of about 81 people saying they feel safe walking during the day, and then that figure drops down to 36% in the nighttime. One can only imagine when you think about that and aggregate that by gender. That's to say that it could only be more grim for women. And if you had to triangulate that statistic with what we are receiving from the national crime statistics, which talk to in the Q3 about 10,818 rapes having taken place, and that such incidents are most likely to happen in public space, meaning parks, beaches, streets, open fields. It speaks to the places where we need to be focusing in terms of forging ahead with solutions. And it speaks to the need to also just focus on vulnerable groups, chief among them women, children. Other data coming from the National Police Service suggests that, there's been a spike in the murder and the assault of children, and of the 6,000 plus murders have occurred, a bulk of them have been against women. So I think all of this information and all of these reports talk to each other, and I think they point us in the direction where we need to focus. And I appreciate that there's quite something pointed being said about the urban character of a lot of the violence and crime that we are seeing, and it correlates with our own messaging that calls for a specific focus on the urban and that rural-urban divide. But in terms of feelings of safety, is something that we need to focus on.
Siphelele, as welcome as it is it anything new though? So you speak of these areas of focus and then us knowing how to proceed. What solutions then can we offer, especially maybe when we take a look at infrastructure? What can be done to better urban areas?
I think you've already begun to answer the question, and I think you make a great point when you point to infrastructure. So in terms of the places where we need to be focusing, so when we think about, just the ability to walk safely, and, what we must understand and what's emanating from our cities that we work with is that sometimes the absence of crime does not mean the presence of safety. And so we need to focus in various areas, but we need to stop looking at crime and violence as purely a policing issue. And so we need to be doing work in terms of breaking cycles of violence, victim empowerment. The report speaks and is about the profiling of victims of crime. And so there's great space to do work in terms of empowering victims. That is in terms of things like walking safely, lighting, visible policing. There's also infrastructure inputs that need to be made, as you are saying. So things like sanitation, proper bathroom and ablution facilities that are accommodating and safe for women to use. As I mentioned before, there's quite another statistic that speaks to the safety of women and vulnerable persons in public spaces. And I mentioned among public spaces, parks, beaches, streets, open fields, taxi ranks. And so cities are doing their own work of collecting data, and the city of eThekwini in particular has given us such amazing insights in terms of their own drilling down to the ward level and profiling women through the safety pin application. And they are finding that, women feel unsafe in public transport spaces such as taxi ranks, and their ability to use public transport safely. And so there's a need to invest in infrastructure investments, proper urban management, consistent urban management, better planning of the built environment, because as we have found in our work, the built environment is a critical place that can either enable or disable crime and violence. And so when we plan for women, those spaces become user-friendly and accessible to everyone. Similarly, when we plan for other vulnerable groups, such as people with disabilities and for children, that can produce safety. I think the most important point, though, is around budgeting. What do we spend available finances on, and where we spend the most becomes critical. And so there's this budding argument and work that we've done as well, really questioning and talking to whether there's a correlation with such big investments by cities into CCTV, and does that translate to crime and violence reduction, and could those budgets be spent better? A budding conversation about increasing safety versus reducing crime. Where are we better off investing?
Fair enough. Just on your point of CCTV cameras, while we're also trying to sort out this electricity crisis in the country, I think it was a video, I'm not sure whether it's Japan or China, where they created a dedicated cycling lane and they're covered by solar panels. So there you are, sorting two issues in one. But I do wonder what kind of conversations we are having with people who actually put women's lives in danger. Some of these men, how are we including them in the conversation? Also for them to maybe take responsibility and say, well, I am part of this, so I don't want to see it fall apart.
Yes. So I spoke to work needing to be done in the area of breaking cycles of violence. And that is exactly where different cities, different municipalities that we are in partnership with are doing work. So Msunduzi, eThekwini have an intervention supported from national government by different spheres of government, called Stepping Stones, Change in Futures, where the engagement is precisely with past, present, and would-be perpetrators of gender-based violence and femicide. And that intervention, and together with others, has talked to possibly also engaging children while they are still young on positive forms of conflict resolution, dealing with the issue of patriarchy as well, and orienting and teaching and educating from a young age around how inequality is manifested in the space of gender, that then translates to the unsafety of women in our society and in our communal spaces as well, and also impacts on their ability to participate in society and to participate in our economies as well. Cities like eThekwini have produced work, and it's showing that there's an inequality in the use or in the safe use of transport, in that 40% of men drive while women find themselves relying on public transport. And so another finding in that space is that while buses and public transport, state-led public transport, are the safer option, they're not necessarily the most convenient option. While minibus taxis are not necessarily the safest option, they tend to be the most convenient option. So what can we do around those dynamics to make things safer?
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we could afford this afternoon. Siphelele Ngobese is a researcher at Inclusive Cities, South African Cities Network. Thank you, ma'am.